The morning sun was rising over New York City when the sky changed forever. Sarah Chen, a coffee shop owner in Manhattan, was opening her store when she noticed something wrong. The sky looked different. There were shapes up there that didn't belong. All around the world, people stopped what they were doing and looked up. In London, workers heading to their offices stood frozen on the sidewalks. In Tokyo, children pointed at the sky instead of going to school. In Cairo, farmers left their fields to stare upward. The shapes were huge. They were bigger than any building, bigger than any mountain. They were ships, but not like any ships humans had ever built. They were dark metal that seemed to eat light, covered in patterns that hurt to look at. There were dozens of them, floating in Earth's atmosphere like they owned it. Dr. Marcus Webb was in his office at NASA when the emergency alarm started screaming. He had been drinking his morning coffee and reading reports about a new Mars mission. Now he was running down hallways filled with panicking scientists and engineers. "What's the situation?" he shouted at his colleague, Dr. Lisa Park. "Unknown vessels in our atmosphere," she said, her face pale. "They appeared 20 minutes ago. No radio contact, no warning. They're just there." The phones started ringing everywhere. Government buildings, military bases, news stations. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. What were those things in the sky? At the Pentagon, General Patricia Hayes was in an emergency meeting with other military leaders. The room was full of maps and computer screens showing the alien ships. Each ship was the size of a small city. "How many?" General Hayes asked. 47 confirmed, came the answer. More appearing every hour. They're positioning themselves over major population centers worldwide. Weapons? Unknown. But our satellites detected massive energy signatures when they arrived. Whatever they have, it makes our nuclear weapons look like firecrackers. President Maria Rodriguez was in the Oval Office, surrounded by advisors. She had been president for 2 years, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. Outside her window, she could see one of the alien ships hovering over Washington, D.C. "See, ma'am," her chief of staff said. "We're getting reports from every major country. The same thing is happening everywhere. London, Paris, Beijing, Moscow. They're all here." "Have they tried to communicate?" the president asked. "Not yet. But our experts think they're waiting for something. They didn't have to wait long. At exactly noon Greenwich Mean Time, every television, radio, and internet connection on Earth was taken over. The normal programming stopped. Instead, there was a voice. It spoke in perfect English, but also in Chinese, Spanish, Arabic, and every other language on Earth at the same time. "People of Earth," the voice said. It was cold and mechanical, like a computer trying to sound like a person. "We are the Galactic Hegemony. We speak for over 3,000 civilized worlds across this galaxy." Sarah Chen stopped making coffee. Dr. Webb stopped reading his reports. General Hayes stopped planning. President Rodriguez stopped everything. Like billions of other humans, they all listened. "For 50 of your years we have watched your species," the voice continued. "We have studied your behavior, your history, your nature. We have reached a conclusion." The alien ships in the sky began to glow with a soft blue light. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Humanity is too violent and unpredictable to join galactic civilization. Your species shows patterns of aggression that threaten peace and order. You fight each other over resources, territory, and ideas. You create weapons designed only to kill. You have no respect for authority or proper social structure. Around the world, people began to gather in the streets. They looked up at the ships and listened to words that would change everything. Therefore, the galactic hegemony has decided that humanity must be managed for the safety of the galaxy and for your own good. You will accept our guidance. The voice paused. In that silence, Sarah Chen felt something strange. She wasn't scared anymore. She was getting angry. "These are our requirements," the voice said. "First, all weapons on your planet must be destroyed. Military weapons, civilian weapons, all of them. Second, your governments will dissolve. The hegemony will provide proper leadership. Third, 90% of your population will be relocated to designated worlds where you can live peacefully under our supervision." Dr. Webb felt his hands curl into fists. General Hayes felt her jaw clench. President Rodriguez felt fire in her chest. The remaining 10% will stay on Earth to maintain your cities and serve as representatives of your species. You will be given useful work that matches your abilities. You will be fed, housed, and protected. But humans around the world weren't thinking about food or housing. They were thinking about something else entirely. You have 72 hours to prepare for our arrival. Resistance will be met with appropriate force. Cooperation will be rewarded. We have done this many times with many species. The process is efficient and painless when you accept it. In the coffee shop, Sarah Chen looked around at her customers. There was an old man who had fought in 3 wars. There was a young mother holding her baby. There was a teenager who dreamed of becoming an astronaut. All of them had the same look in their eyes. To demonstrate our capabilities and encourage cooperation, the voice said, observe. One of the alien ships moved away from Earth. It flew toward the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. The ship stopped next to a large asteroid, one that was several miles across. Every telescope and camera on Earth watched what happened next. A beam of light came from the alien ship. It touched the asteroid for less than a second. The asteroid, which had existed for billions of years, simply disappeared. It turned into dust and gas and nothing. This demonstration represents a tiny fraction of our capabilities, the voice said. We have destroyed entire solar systems when necessary, but we prefer peaceful solutions. Accept our help. Accept our guidance. Accept our protection. The transmission ended. The alien ships continued to float in the sky, silent and watching. In the hours that followed, the world's leaders tried to contact each other. Phone lines were jammed. Internet servers crashed from too much traffic. Everyone was trying to talk to everyone else at once. Emergency meetings started in every capital city. In Washington, President Rodriguez gathered her cabinet and military leaders. In Moscow, the Russian president called his generals. In Beijing, the Chinese leadership held urgent conferences. The same thing was happening everywhere, but something else was happening too, something the aliens hadn't expected. In London, a taxi driver turned off his radio and said to his passenger, "Did you hear that? They want to manage us. Like we're children who can't take care of ourselves." In Mumbai, a street vendor closed her stall and told her neighbor, "They think we're too violent? They just destroyed an asteroid to scare us. Who's violent here?" In Sao Paulo, a factory worker stopped his machine and said to his co-workers, 90% relocated? That means they want to break up our families, our communities, everything we've built. The anger was spreading. It started small in conversations between friends and neighbors. But it grew quickly. Social media, despite the crashed servers, began to fill with messages. Not messages of fear or surrender, but messages of rage. Dr. Webb called his daughter at college. "Dad, did you see the news?" she asked. "Those aliens think they can just tell us what to do?" "Sweetheart, they have ships that can destroy planets," he said. "So what?" she replied. "That doesn't give them the right to destroy our lives." General Hayes was in another meeting when her aide brought her a report. "Ma'am, we're getting communications from military units around the world. They're all asking the same question." "What question? When do we fight back?" Sarah Chen had closed her coffee shop early. She was walking through the streets of New York, and she wasn't alone. Thousands of people were walking with her. They weren't running away from the alien ship overhead. They were walking toward it. A reporter with a camera stopped her. "Ma'am, aren't you afraid?" The alien said they could destroy the planet. Sarah looked up at the alien ship. It was enormous and terrifying. But she felt something stronger than fear. "Yeah, they probably could," she said. "But they came here and told us we're not good enough for their galaxy. They told us we can't govern ourselves. They told us they're going to take our children and scatter us across space like we're animals." She looked directly into the camera. "Well, I've got news for them. This is our planet. These are our families. This is our home. And nobody, not even aliens with big ships, gets to tell us how to live." Around the world, similar scenes were playing out. In every city, in every town, People were making the same choice. They were choosing anger over fear. They were choosing pride over survival. The world leaders were making their choice too, but it wasn't the choice anyone expected. President Rodriguez was on a video call with the leaders of Russia, China, Britain, France, Germany, India, Japan, and dozens of other countries. The call was encrypted and hidden from the alien ships, they hoped. "The analysis is clear," the British Prime Minister said. "They have superior technology. They have superior numbers. If we fight, we lose. If we surrender, we also lose," said the Chinese premier. "We lose everything that makes us human. My military advisors say we have no chance," said the Russian president. "But my people are in the streets demanding war. They're not afraid anymore, they're angry." President Rodriguez looked at the faces on her screen. These were the most powerful people on Earth. They could order armies, control nuclear weapons, and make decisions that affected billions. But today, they were just humans facing the same choice as everyone else. "I've been getting reports," she said. "From every continent, every country. The people aren't asking us to surrender. They're asking us to fight." "It's suicide," said the German chancellor. "Maybe," said the Indian Prime Minister. "But it's our choice to make." The call continued for hours. They discussed military capabilities, evacuation plans, and diplomatic options. But in the end, they all knew what they were going to do. The people had already decided, and the leaders were going to follow. The 72 hours were almost over. In a few minutes, the alien ships would expect an answer. Around the world, humans gathered to hear what their leaders would say. They stood in parks and squares, crowded around televisions and radios, watched streams on their phones. They knew what was coming. They could feel it in the air. President Rodriguez appeared on every screen and speaker on Earth. Behind her stood the leaders of every major nation. Their faces were grim but determined. "People of Earth," she began. "Citizens of every nation, every culture, every faith. We have heard the demands of those who call themselves our superiors. We have seen their demonstrations of power. We understand the consequences of our decision." She paused and looked directly into the camera. "We reject their ultimatum. We reject their authority over us. We reject their right to decide our fate." Ginter, the streets people began to cheer. Not because they thought they would win, but because someone had finally said what they all felt. If they want our world, they can try to take it. But they will find that humans do not surrender our freedom for safety. We do not trade our dignity for peace. We do not bow to those who would treat us as animals to be managed. The alien ships began to move. They were getting ready for war. They will learn what humans do when we're threatened. They will learn what happens when you try to destroy our families, our homes, our way of life. President Rodriguez smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. "Welcome to Earth, now get off our lawn." The transmission ended. The alien ships powered up their weapons. The war for Earth was about to begin. The alien response was swift and brutal. Within minutes of President Rodriguez's declaration, the first energy beams came down from the ships. They targeted military bases, power plants, and government buildings. The beams were precise and devastating, turning concrete and steel into glowing craters. But the aliens made their first mistake. They expected the attacks to break human resistance. Instead, they made it stronger. Colonel James Murphy was at Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado when the beam hit. The entire command center disappeared in a flash of blue light. Murphy was thrown 50 feet by the explosion, his uniform burned, his face covered in dirt and blood. He should have been dead. Instead, he picked up his rifle and started walking toward the alien ship hovering overhead. "Sir," one of his men shouted, "we need to evacuate." "Evacuate where?" Murphy spat blood and kept walking. "They're destroying everything anyway. Might as well take some of them with us." That attitude spread faster than the alien attacks. "Captain, Lisa Zhang was aboard the USS Gerald Ford when the alien beam cut her aircraft carrier in half. The massive ship, pride of the U.S. Navy, broke apart and began to sink. Most of her crew was dead or drowning. Zhang found herself floating in the Pacific Ocean with a handful of survivors. They should have been focused on survival, on getting to lifeboats and calling for rescue. Instead, Zhang was thinking about revenge. "There," she said, pointing at pieces of alien debris floating in the water. When their beam had destroyed the carrier, some of their technology had been damaged too. "We're taking that with us." Her communications officer, treading water beside her, looked at her like she was crazy. "Captain, we need to get out of the water. We need medical attention. We need to learn how their weapons work," Zhang said. She started swimming toward the debris. "They want a war? Let's give them one they'll never forget." The aliens had studied human warfare, but they had only studied the official parts. They knew about armies and governments and military strategies. They didn't understand what humans were really like when they got angry. In downtown Chicago, office worker Maria Santos was evacuating her building when she saw something that changed everything. An alien patrol craft, smaller than the big ships, was flying between the skyscrapers. It was scanning buildings with a green light, probably looking for important targets. Maria noticed something. The craft was flying low, maybe trying to avoid the big ship's weapons above. And it was alone. She called to the other evacuees. "Hey, you see that thing?" "Yeah, we see it," someone yelled back. "We need to get out of here before it shoots us." "Or," Maria said, picking up a piece of concrete rubble, "we could shoot it first." That's how the Battle of Michigan Avenue started. An office worker with a piece of concrete and a crazy idea. Within minutes, hundreds of people were throwing everything they could find at the alien craft. Rocks, bottles, pieces of debris, even their shoes. The alien pilot was confused. This wasn't in their intelligence reports. Why were the humans throwing primitive weapons at advanced technology? The confusion got worse when Maria managed to hit something important. Her chunk of concrete struck what looked like a sensor array, and the craft began to wobble. "It's working!" she screamed. "Keep throwing!" The alien craft tried to retreat, but it was too late. Hundreds of humans were surrounding it now, armed with anything they could pick up. The pilot tried to fire back, but the craft was damaged and the shots went wide. When the craft finally crashed into the side of a building, the humans didn't run away. They swarmed over it like ants, pulling apart the technology with their bare hands. This scene repeated itself in cities around the world. The aliens had expected organized military resistance. They hadn't expected every human to become a soldier. In Mumbai, taxi driver Raj Patel used his car to ram an alien scout vehicle. He died in the collision, but he took the alien vehicle with him. Before he died, he managed to transmit video of the alien technology to the internet. In Berlin, schoolteacher Anna Müller led her students in an attack on an alien communications device. The children threw textbooks and pencils while she used a fire axe to hack at alien machinery. In Lagos, market vendor Joseph Okoro organized his entire street to build barricades from overturned cars and furniture. When alien ground troops tried to advance, they found themselves in a maze of obstacles defended by angry humans with kitchen knives and farming tools. The aliens began to realize they had made a serious error in judgment. Admiral Vexhai of the Hegemony Fourth Fleet floated in his command chamber, his tentacles writhing with confusion. He had conquered 47 planets for the Hegemony. He knew how planetary subjugation worked. First, you demonstrated superior power. Second, you destroyed the organized military. Third, the population surrendered and accepted guidance. That's how it always worked. That's how it had worked for 3,000 years of hegemony expansion. But these humans were wrong. They were doing everything wrong. "Report," he commanded his tactical officer. "Sir, we have successfully destroyed 78% of their organized military infrastructure. Their governments are in chaos. Their communication networks are disrupted." "Excellent. Surrender negotiations should begin soon." "Sir, there are no surrender negotiations. Human resistance has increased by 340% since we began our attacks. Admiral Vexhai's translator implant must have malfunctioned." "Repeat that." "Human resistance has increased, sir. Instead of surrendering, they appeared to be angry." This was impossible. Fear was the foundation of hegemony power. Show a species that you could destroy them and they would submit. It worked on every intelligent species in the galaxy. Perhaps they don't understand their situation, Admiral Vexhai said. Increased demonstrations of power. That was mistake. Number 2. The aliens began targeting civilian infrastructure. They destroyed bridges, dams, hospitals, and schools. They thought this would make humans realize how hopeless their situation was. Instead, it made humans stop thinking about survival and start thinking about making the aliens pay. Dr. Ellen Rodriguez had been a peaceful research scientist at MIT before the war started. She studied renewable energy and had never held a weapon in her life. When the aliens destroyed her laboratory and killed half her colleagues, that changed. She gathered the surviving scientists and engineers from universities around Boston. They started working on a project that would have been impossible before: reverse engineering alien technology. We have pieces from 17 different alien devices, she told her team. Weapons, sensors, communication equipment, power sources. We need to figure out how they work. Ellen, we're not weapons engineers, one of her colleagues protested. We study solar panels and wind turbines. Then we learn, she said, holding up a piece of alien metal that still pulsed with energy. They think we're too primitive to understand their technology. Let's prove them wrong. The same thing was happening everywhere humans could get their hands on alien debris. In hidden workshops and basement laboratories, human engineers and scientists, and even hobbyists were taking apart alien devices and trying to understand them. Most of the time, they failed. Alien technology was incredibly advanced, built with materials and principles that humans had never seen. But sometimes they succeeded. Private Danny Kim had been a video game programmer before he joined the Army. He was stationed at Fort Knox when the base was destroyed. He survived because he was in the bathroom when the alien beam hit. Now he was hiding in the ruins with a laptop and several pieces of alien communication equipment. While other soldiers were planning guerrilla attacks, Danny was doing something different. He was hacking. Alien computer systems were unlike anything humans had ever built, but Danny noticed something interesting. They used quantum encryption, which was incredibly secure. But they also used it for everything, even simple commands like opening doors or turning on lights. That's like using a nuclear bomb to kill a mosquito, he muttered to himself. Way too much power for simple tasks. Humans had learned to be efficient with their limited computing power. They knew how to find shortcuts, how to use weaknesses, how to make systems do things they weren't supposed to do. Danny found the weakness. The alien systems were so advanced that they didn't bother to secure basic functions. Why would they? No primitive species should be able to access their networks at all. But Danny wasn't trying to break their security. He was trying to use their own efficiency against them. He sent a simple command through their network. Status report. All units. To the alien network, this looked like a routine internal communication. The system automatically responded, giving Danny a complete map of all alien forces on Earth. Within hours, human resistance groups around the world had detailed information about alien positions, weapons, and plans. The aliens were starting to realize that humans were nothing like the species they had conquered before. Most species, when faced with superior force, would try to negotiate or hide. Some would fight back, but in predictable ways using conventional military tactics. Humans did everything at once, and nothing they did made sense. They attacked with armies when they had them, and with kitchen knives when they didn't. They tried to negotiate while shooting. They hid in some places and attacked impossibly strong positions in others. They studied alien technology and turned it into weapons. They used their own destroyed infrastructure as ammunition. Worst of all, they never gave up. General Sarah Kim had lost her entire command when the aliens destroyed Seoul. She was hiding in the mountains with a few hundred soldiers and civilians. Any sane military commander would focus on survival. Instead, General Kim was planning an attack on the alien ship hovering over what used to be her city. General, her aide said carefully, that ship destroyed our entire army in about 10 minutes. We have no missiles, no air support, no heavy weapons. We have something better, General Kim said, looking at the assembled soldiers and civilians. There were students and grandparents, farmers and office workers, all carrying whatever weapons they could find. "What's that, ma'am?" General Kim smiled. "We have nothing left to lose." Her plan was insane. Use the city's subway tunnels to get close to the alien ship's landing zone. Set off every explosive they could find simultaneously. Try to damage the ship's landing gear so it couldn't take off. It shouldn't have worked. It was suicide. It worked perfectly. The alien ship crashed into the Han River. General Kim died in the explosion, along with most of her people. But they brought down a ship that was supposed to be invulnerable, and they did it with homemade bombs and pure human stubbornness. News of the victory spread across the globe through hidden communication networks. Humans everywhere learned that the aliens could be hurt, could be defeated, could die. The war was changing. Admiral Vex High was no longer floating calmly in his command chamber. His tentacles were knotted with stress and his skin had changed from blue to a sickly yellow color. "Status report," he commanded. "Sir, we have lost 14 ships. We have sustained 23,000 casualties. Human resistance continues to increase." "How is that possible? We have destroyed their military." "Sir, every human appears to be their military now." Admiral Vex High tried to understand. In his species there were soldiers and civilians. Soldiers fought, civilians surrendered. That's how civilized warfare worked. But humans seemed to think that anyone could be a soldier. Children threw rocks at his patrol craft. Elderly humans built explosive devices. Scientists became engineers of war. Artists created propaganda that made his own troops question their mission. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission." "From Earth? From their government?" "No, sir, from everyone." The transmission was unlike anything the hegemony had ever received. It wasn't from a single leader or government. It was from millions of humans, all talking at once. Some spoke in English, others in Chinese, Spanish, Arabic, Hindi, and dozens of other languages. But they were all saying the same thing. "You came to our world uninvited. You demanded our surrender. You threatened our families. You destroyed our cities. You thought we would be afraid." The voices grew louder, more angry. 6 months after the war began, humanity was supposed to be extinct. According to every hegemony computer model, every strategic analysis, and every piece of conventional military wisdom, the species should have been wiped out or surrendered. Instead, they were getting stronger. Dr. Rachel Torres had once been a medical researcher studying cancer treatments. Now she was standing in a hidden laboratory beneath the ruins of Mexico City, holding something that would have been impossible before the war, a weapon that used alien technology, built by human hands. "It works," she told her team, her voice filled with amazement. "The energy converter actually works." The device in her hands looked like a strange hybrid of human and alien engineering. Alien power cells connected to human electronics, wrapped in a metal casing made from melted-down alien hull fragments. "How much power?" asked Tom, her former research assistant who was now her weapons engineer. "Enough to punch through their personal shields," Rachel said. "Maybe enough to damage their light vehicles." Tom grinned. "The resistance groups are going to love this." This scene was happening in hidden workshops around the world. Humans were doing something that should have been impossible. They were adapting. Alien technology faster than the aliens could adapt to human tactics. The secret was desperation, mixed with human ingenuity. When your species faced extinction, you learned to innovate quickly. Captain Susan Walsh had been a Navy engineer before the war. Now she was leading a team of survivors in the flooded ruins of Norfolk Naval Base. They had spent months studying alien ship fragments that had fallen into the water. "The hull material is self-repairing," she explained to her team, "but only up to a certain threshold of damage. Hit it hard enough, fast enough, and the repair systems can't keep up." Her team had been working on a solution. They called it the human approach to advanced materials. "If you can't understand how it works, break it harder." "We've modified our torpedoes," she continued. "Instead of one big explosion, we get a series of smaller ones in rapid sequence. The alien hull tries to repair the first hit, but the second and third hits come before it can finish." "Petty officer." Martinez raised his hand. Captain, our torpedo tubes were destroyed in the first attack. Susan smiled. Then we'll deliver them by hand. That was the human approach to everything now. If the proper tools were destroyed, improvise. If the standard tactics failed, invent new ones. If the enemy was too advanced, get creative. Lieutenant Michael Chen had been a pilot in the Air Force. His F-35 fighter jet had been vaporized in the first wave of attacks, along with his entire squadron. He should have been dead. Instead, he was flying an impossible machine over the Pacific Ocean. It was built from salvaged alien anti-grav units bolted to the frame of a civilian helicopter, powered by alien energy cells, and controlled with modified video game controllers. The machine looked ridiculous. It flew like a drunk bird and made sounds that hurt to hear, but it could do something that human aircraft never could before. It could fight alien ships on equal terms. Bandit at 2 o'clock, his gunner called out. She had been a video game streamer before the war. Now she was operating human-built weapons that fired stolen alien ammunition. I see it, Michael said, turning their hybrid craft toward an alien patrol vessel. Let's show them what human engineering looks like. The battle that followed would have been impossible to predict before the war. Advanced alien technology fought against improvised human ingenuity. Clean, efficient alien weapons against chaotic, unpredictable human tactics. The alien pilot was trained, experienced, and equipped with the best weapons the hegemony could provide. But he was also confused, frustrated, and increasingly desperate. Human combat made no sense. They used tactics that should have been suicidal. They combined technologies in ways that should have been impossible. They took risks that no rational being would consider. Michael's craft shouldn't have been able to win against a purpose-built alien fighter. It was held together with spare parts and human stubbornness. It won anyway. The adaptation was happening faster than anyone had expected. Human engineers were reverse engineering alien technology and improving it. Human soldiers were learning alien tactics and developing counters. Human scientists were turning alien medical knowledge into biological weapons. Dr. Jennifer Park had been a biology professor at Stanford. Now she was running a secret laboratory in the California mountains, working on something that would have horrified her before the war. The alien medical nanobots are designed to repair cellular damage, she explained to her team. But they're also programmed to recognize specific alien DNA patterns. Her assistant, a former graduate student named David, looked at the samples under a microscope. So they only work on aliens? Exactly. But what if we could reprogram them? The idea was simple and terrible. Take the aliens' own medical technology and turn it into a weapon that would target alien biology while leaving humans untouched. Jennifer knew it was a war crime by any standard of civilized warfare, but the aliens had made it clear they didn't consider humans civilized. We're not trying to kill them all, she told her team. We're trying to make them sick enough to want to go home. Meanwhile, the psychological warfare was having effects that nobody had expected. The hegemony had conquered thousands of worlds, but they had never faced an enemy like humanity. Most species, when defeated, became resigned to their fate. They might resist for a while, but eventually they accepted their new reality. Humans seemed to get angrier the longer the war went on. Commander Zekthol of the Hegemony Occupation Forces was having his worst month in a century of military service. He was supposed to be managing the pacification of the North American continent. Instead, he was dealing with humans who treated every day as a new opportunity for violence. "Report," he commanded his aide. "Sir, we have successfully secured 12% of the designated area, and the other 88%? Still actively hostile, sir. The humans have organized into what they call resistance cells. Each cell operates independently, but they share information and resources." Commander Zekthul felt his skin change to the gray color that indicated stress among his species. "How many resistance cells?" "We estimate approximately 50,000 active cells, sir. Each cell contains between 10 and 500 humans. The mathematics were horrifying. That meant millions of humans were actively fighting, not counting the ones who provided support, intelligence, or supplies. Sir, his aide continued, we have also detected unusual patterns in their communication networks. What kind of patterns? They appear to be mocking us, sir. That was new. In all of hegemony history, no conquered species had ever mocked their conquerors. Fear, anger, despair, resignation, those were normal. But mockery? Show me, Zekthul commanded. His aide displayed human communication intercepts. The humans had created songs, videos, and images that made fun of alien technology, alien appearance, and alien tactics. They had given the aliens insulting nicknames. They had created elaborate jokes about alien military failures. Worse, the mockery was spreading to other resistance cells. Humans were sharing their jokes across the planet, building morale by laughing at their supposedly superior enemies. Sir, his aide said carefully, there's more. The mockery is affecting our troops. How? Some of our soldiers are beginning to doubt the mission, sir. They're questioning whether humans are actually inferior if they can make us look foolish. This was a completely new problem for the hegemony. Their entire system was based on the idea that they were superior to all other species. But humans were making them look weak, incompetent, and sometimes ridiculous. The worst part was that it was working. Hegemony troops were starting to make mistakes, to hesitate, to question orders. Some were even requesting transfers away from Earth duty. The situation was becoming what hegemony military analysts called a cascade failure. Instead of breaking human resistance, the war was starting to break hegemony confidence. Admiral Vex High was receiving reports that made no sense according to everything he knew about warfare and psychology. Sir, intelligence reports indicate that human morale is actually increasing, his tactical officer reported. That's impossible. We've destroyed their major cities, killed millions of their people, and devastated their infrastructure. Yes, sir, but they appear to view each loss as motivation for revenge rather than reason for surrender. Admiral Vexi High looked at the tactical displays showing human resistance activity. Instead of declining over time, the red markers indicating active resistance were multiplying. They're breeding soldiers faster than we can kill them, he muttered. Not breeding, sir. Converting. Every human we attack seems to convince 10 more to join the resistance. This was the opposite of how conquest was supposed to work. Overwhelming force should discourage resistance, not inspire it. Sir, we have another problem, his communications officer reported. We're receiving reports from other hegemony sectors. What kind of reports? Species that were previously pacified are showing signs of renewed resistance. They appear to be inspired by the human example. Admiral Vexhai felt his tentacles writhe in horror. This was his worst nightmare, the idea that human resistance could spread to other worlds. For 50,000 years, hegemony power had been based on the assumption that resistance was futile. No species could stand against their superior technology and overwhelming force. But humans had proven that assumption wrong. They had shown that a primitive species could fight back, could adapt, could even win individual battles against impossible odds. Worse, they had shown other species that the hegemony could be mocked, frustrated, and made to look foolish. The reports were coming in from across the galaxy. The Kepler colonies were refusing to pay tribute. The Vegan systems were demanding self-governance. The Centauri Federation was building weapons and training militias. Sir, his aide said quietly, High Command is requesting a full report on the Earth situation. Admiral Vexhai knew what that meant. High Command was starting to question whether the conquest of Earth was worth the cost. Not just the military cost, but the political cost of looking weak in front of the entire galaxy. Prepare the report, he ordered, but also prepare contingency plans. What kind of contingency plans, sir? Plans for what we do if we can't conquer these humans. The war was entering a new phase. It was no longer just about Earth. It was about whether the galactic hegemony could maintain control over an empire that was starting to remember what freedom looked like. And it was all because humans had refused to do the reasonable thing. Instead of surrendering when faced with superior force, They had decided to make their enemies regret ever finding Earth. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is corner a species with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Humans were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting to prove that freedom was worth any cost. And they were winning more battles than anyone had thought possible. The message came from a star system 47 light-years away. It was transmitted in broken English mixed with clicks and whistles that human computers had never heard before. Help. Humans of Earth. We are Zephyrians of Kepler 442. We heard your war. We want to fight too. Captain Maria Santos, formerly an office worker in Chicago and now a communications specialist for the Earth Resistance Network, stared at the translation on her screen. She had to read it 3 times before she believed it. Are you sure this is real? She asked her team. Signal analysis confirms it's coming from outside our solar system, replied Dr. James Kim, who had been a radio astronomer before becoming humanity's first interstellar communications expert. The transmission delay matches the distance to Kepler 442. But how do they know about our war? Electromagnetic signals mostly. Our radio and television broadcasts have been reaching nearby star systems for decades. But also, he paused. I think the hegemony has been talking about us. That was when Maria realized the truth. The war had spread beyond Earth. The galaxy was watching humanity fight the hegemony, and some species were deciding they wanted to fight too. Get me a connection to Earth Command, she ordered. They need to know about this. President Rodriguez, now operating from a hidden bunker in the Rocky Mountains, listened to the report with growing amazement. How many species have made contact? She asked. 17 confirmed so far, Maria reported. All of them asking for advice on how to resist hegemony control. Some are already fighting. Fighting how? The Zephyrians are using our tactics. Guerrilla warfare, improvised weapons, psychological operations. The Centaurians are doing something even more interesting. They're refusing to work. That was a new concept in galactic resistance. Most species, when conquered by the hegemony, were allowed to maintain their civilization in exchange for tribute and obedience. The hegemony didn't usually occupy worlds directly. They just demanded submission. But the Centaurians had learned from human broadcasts that you could say no. They're just not doing what the hegemony tells them anymore. President Rodriguez asked. That's right. The hegemony demands tribute, the Centaurians ignore them. The hegemony sends threats, the Centaurians laugh at them. The hegemony sends ships to enforce compliance. The Centaurians hide in their cities and make the occupation as expensive and annoying as possible. It was the human strategy applied to an entire galactic civilization. Make compliance so difficult and expensive that the rulers start questioning whether the territory is worth controlling. The reports were coming in from across the galaxy. Species that had been peaceful subjects of the hegemony for thousands of years were suddenly remembering what independence meant. On Proxima Centauri B, the native Proximans had started broadcasting human music and copying human art. This might not sound like rebellion, but to the hegemony it was terrifying. They had spent millennia convincing conquered species that hegemony culture was superior. Now species were choosing the culture of a primitive species over hegemony civilization. In the Vega system, the aquatic vegans had begun what they called the swimming rebellion. They refused to surface to meet with hegemony administrators, instead staying underwater and communicating only through encoded sonar signals that mimicked human resistance codes. The Tau Cetians had gone even further. They had started building weapons based on intercepted transmissions of human engineering broadcasts. Their weapons were crude compared to hegemony technology, but they worked. More importantly, they were built with Tau Cetian materials using Tau Cetian methods, which meant the hegemony couldn't simply shut down their manufacturing. Admiral Vexhai was no longer just dealing with one rebellious planet. He was watching the slow collapse of galactic order. Status report on the Earth situation, he demanded. Sir, human resistance continues to grow stronger. Our forces now control less than 8% of the planetary surface. Human forces have captured or destroyed 43 of our ships and killed over 35,000 of our personnel. And the other situations? Sir, we now have active rebellions in over 200 star systems. The rebellions appear to be coordinated, sharing information and tactics developed on Earth. Admiral Vexhai felt something that no hegemony commander had felt in millennia: panic. This wasn't just a military defeat. This was the end of everything the hegemony represented. How are they coordinating across interstellar distances? They appear to be using our own communication networks against us, sir. They've developed techniques for hiding messages within normal hegemony data transmissions. That was typically human. Instead of building their own interstellar communication system, they had figured out how to hijack the one that already existed. The technique had been developed by Private Danny Kim, the former video game programmer who had first hacked alien systems. He had discovered that hegemony communications were so advanced that they included automatic translation protocols for thousands of languages. Danny had realized that if he could make human communications look like routine translation updates, they would be automatically forwarded throughout the hegemony network without anyone noticing. It's like hiding a secret message inside a software update, he explained to his team. The system is designed to share translation data, so it automatically distributes our hidden messages to every hegemony outpost in the galaxy. The result was an invisible network that connected human resistance fighters with alien rebels across thousands of light years. They were sharing tactics, intelligence, and most importantly, hope. The hegemony's own technology was being used to organize the largest rebellion in galactic history. But the real breakthrough came when humanity made its first alien ally. The ship appeared in Earth orbit without warning. It was small, clearly damaged, and broadcasting a surrender signal. But it wasn't surrendering to humanity, it was surrendering to Earth. "This is Flight Commander Kethvar of the Hegemony 7th Scout Fleet," the transmission began. "I am requesting permission to defect to the human resistance." Every weapon on Earth that could reach orbit was pointed at the alien ship. But President Rodriguez made a decision that would change the war forever. "Permission granted. Come down and let's talk." Commander Kethvar was a reptilian creature about 7 feet tall, with scales that changed color based on his emotions. When he stepped out of his damaged ship at the hidden airfield in Montana, his scales were the deep purple that meant hope in his species. "Why?" President Rodriguez asked him directly. "Why are you betraying your own people?" "Because they are not my people anymore," Kethvar replied in accented but clear English. "For 300 years my species has served the hegemony. We were told it was for peace, for order, for the good of the galaxy." His scales shifted to angry red. "But you have shown us what the hegemony really is. You have shown us that they are not bringing peace. They are bringing slavery. And you have shown us that slavery can be defeated." Commander Kethvar had brought more than just his ship. He had brought intelligence about hegemony military operations, maps of their supply lines, and most importantly, proof that the hegemony was not as strong as they pretended to be. "Your resistance has caused a crisis in the Hegemony High Council," he explained. "Half of them want to destroy Earth completely. The other half want to negotiate a withdrawal." "What do you think we should do?" President Rodriguez asked. Commander Kethvar's scales turned bright gold, the color of determination among his people. "I think you should keep fighting. Because every day you resist, more species remember what freedom means. Every battle you win proves that the hegemony can be defeated. Every ship you destroy shows other rebels that these conquerors are not gods." The alien defection opened new possibilities for the war. Commander Kethvar's species, the Saurians, were expert engineers and ship designers. They began working with human engineers to create hybrid technologies that combined the best of both species' knowledge. Dr. Ellen Rodriguez, the former MIT energy researcher, found herself working alongside Saurian quantum physicists to develop weapons that neither species could have created alone. "The humans think in ways we never considered," Commander Kethvar explained to his fellow defectors, because he wasn't alone anymore. More aliens were arriving every day, fleeing hegemony forces to join the rebellion. They take our advanced materials and use them in primitive ways that somehow work better than our sophisticated methods. They combine technologies that should be incompatible. They solve problems by ignoring the rules that say the problems can't be solved. The hybrid human-alien teams were creating innovations that surprised everyone. Human creativity combined with alien knowledge was producing results that were better than either could achieve alone. More importantly, the defections were proving that the war wasn't humans against aliens. It was freedom against tyranny, and freedom was winning allies throughout the galaxy. The hegemony's worst fear was becoming reality. Instead of crushing a single rebellious species, they had inspired a galaxy-wide revolution. Species that had been subjects for millennia were remembering that they had been free before the hegemony came. Species that had never known freedom were learning that it was possible. The rebellion was spreading faster than hegemony forces could contain it. For every world they pacified, 3 more rose in rebellion. For every ship they sent to crush resistance, they lost contact with 2 more star systems. Admiral Vexhai received the order he had been dreading: report to Hegemony High Command to explain his failures. But he wasn't going to report his failures. He was going to report humanity's success. Because somewhere in the past year of fighting, these impossible, stubborn, creative, and absolutely insane creatures, Admiral Vexhai had realized something that would have horrified his younger self. He was starting to admire them. They had taken a hopeless situation and turned it into a galactic revolution. They had taken inferior technology and made it work better than advanced systems. They had taken the fear that was supposed to break them and turned it into fury that was breaking their enemies. Most importantly, they had shown the galaxy something that had been forgotten for 50,000 years: that fighting for freedom was better than accepting slavery, even if the fight seemed impossible to win. Admiral Vexhai made his own decision. Instead of reporting to High Command, he sent a message to Earth. "This is Admiral Vexhai of the Hegemony 4th Fleet. I wish to discuss terms for my defection to the Human Alliance." The war had become something nobody expected. It was no longer about Earth's survival. It had become about the galaxy's freedom. And humanity, the species that was supposed to be too primitive and violent for galactic civilization, had become the leaders of the largest liberation movement in galactic history. The galaxy was learning what humans had always known: freedom was worth fighting for, no matter what the odds. 3 years after the hegemony demanded Earth's surrender, President Maria Rodriguez stood before the largest gathering in galactic history. The makeshift assembly hall was built in orbit around Earth, constructed from salvaged alien ships and human engineering. Representatives from over 400 species filled the vast space, their different atmospheric requirements managed by a patchwork of life support systems that should never have worked together. But it did work, because humans had learned to make impossible things work, and they had taught the galaxy to do the same. 3 years ago, President Rodriguez began, her words translated simultaneously into thousands of languages. The galactic hegemony came to Earth with a simple message: surrender or die. A murmur went through the assembly. Many of the alien representatives had been part of the hegemony forces that had delivered that ultimatum. Now they wore the blue and white badges of the Free Galactic Alliance. They told us we were too violent and chaotic for their civilized galaxy. They said we needed to be managed for our own good and the good of all sentient life. President Rodriguez paused, looking out at the incredible diversity of life forms gathered before her. There were crystalline beings from the Sirius system, gas form entities from the Jupiter-like worlds of Kepler, hive minds from the asteroid belts of Wolf 359, and hundreds of other species that had once been subjects of the hegemony. Today we gather not as subjects, but as free beings, not because the hegemony gave us permission, but because we took our freedom back. The applause was a cacophony of sounds that human ears had never heard before the war began: clicks, whistles, harmonics, electromagnetic pulses, and chemical releases that somehow combined into something that sounded like celebration. But the victory hadn't come easily. The final battle for the hegemony capital world of Zentros Prime had lasted 8 months. It wasn't a battle in the traditional sense. There were no massive fleets clashing in space, no armies marching across planets. Instead, It had been the most human battle in galactic history. General Susan Kim, formerly an engineer, and now the architect of what historians would call the Chaos Campaign, had realized that the hegemony's greatest strength was also their greatest weakness. "They've built the most perfect administrative system in galactic history," she had explained to her staff. "Every world reports to sector commands. Every sector command reports to regional headquarters. Every regional headquarters reports to the capital." Her aide, a former taxi driver named Carlos who had become one of the war's best strategic analysts, saw where she was going. "So if we disrupt the system, we don't destroy it," General Kim said with a smile. "We make it work for us." The plan was classically human. Instead of trying to conquer the hegemony capital, they would convince the hegemony to defeat itself. It started with the defectors. Admiral Vexhai hadn't been the only hegemony commander to switch sides. By the end of the second year, over 300 hegemony ships had defected to the Free Alliance. Each defection brought military intelligence, but more importantly, they brought access codes and communication protocols. Danny Kim, the former video game programmer who had become humanity's greatest cyber warfare specialist, used those codes to launch what he called Operation Bureaucracy. "Every authoritarian system depends on paperwork," he explained to President Rodriguez. "Orders, reports, supply requisitions, personnel transfers. The bigger the system, the more paperwork it needs." "So we're going to attack them with paperwork?" the president asked. "We're going to drown them in their own paperwork," Danny grinned. The attack was elegant in its simplicity. Using captured communication codes, human hackers began flooding the hegemony system with fake but perfectly formatted official documents. Orders to transfer troops to locations that didn't exist, supply requisitions for equipment that had never been invented, personnel files for soldiers who had died decades ago, urgent reports about crises that were completely made up. But the fake documents were indistinguishable from real ones. They used proper hegemony formatting, correct authorization codes, and official language that had been perfected over millennia. The hegemony bureaucracy began processing the fake documents as if they were real. Ships were sent to empty star systems to deal with imaginary emergencies. Supplies were diverted to non-existent bases. Commanders found themselves receiving contradictory orders from different departments. Within months, the hegemony military was paralyzed by its own administrative system. "Sir," Admiral Kekstar reported to the Hegemony High Council, "we have over 2 million pending orders that make no sense, supply chains that lead nowhere, and troops who don't know where they're supposed to be." High Counselor Zephys, the ancient being who had led the hegemony for over 10,000 years, tried to understand what was happening. "Are we being attacked?" "Not in any conventional sense, sir. We appear to be confused." That was the beauty of the human strategy. They hadn't destroyed the hegemony war machine, they had made it too confused to function, but the bureaucratic attack was just the beginning. While the hegemony military was drowning in fake paperwork, the Free Alliance was growing stronger. Species that had been enemies for millennia were working together, united by their shared experience of human-style resistance. Dr. Ellen Rodriguez had established the Interspecies Technology Exchange, where alien scientists and human engineers worked together to create innovations that none of them could have developed alone. "The humans have taught us something we had forgotten," explained Dr. Vexthun, a Centaurian physicist who had defected from the Hegemony Science Corps. "Innovation comes from combining different ideas, not from perfecting existing ones." The exchange was producing technologies that were revolutionizing galactic civilization. Faster-than-light communication systems that worked by combining human quantum theory with alien dimensional mathematics. Energy weapons that used human chaos theory to make hegemony shields ineffective. Medical treatments that merged human biological knowledge with alien regeneration techniques. Most importantly, they were developing technologies of freedom. Captain Lisa Zhang, the former Navy officer who had survived the destruction of her aircraft carrier, was now commanding a fleet of liberation ships. These weren't warships designed to conquer. They were ships designed to free other ships. "We don't want to destroy hegemony vessels," she explained to her crew, which included humans, defected aliens, and representatives from newly freed worlds. We want to convert them. Her ships carried broadcasting equipment that could hack into hegemony communication systems and show their crews what was really happening in the galaxy. They carried evidence of the successful rebellions, testimonies from freed worlds, and most powerfully, proof that the hegemony could be defeated. Many hegemony ships, when confronted with this evidence, simply surrendered without firing a shot. Their crews had spent their entire careers believing that hegemony rule was inevitable and beneficial. Learning that hundreds of worlds were successfully governing themselves was a shock that shattered their worldview. But the final assault on Zentros Prime didn't use weapons at all. It used the one thing that had started the whole war: communication. Citizens of Zentros Prime, the message began. Broadcast simultaneously on every communication channel on the hegemony capital world. This is President Maria Rodriguez of Earth, speaking on behalf of the Free Galactic Alliance. The message was being transmitted by a network of thousands of ships from hundreds of different species, all orbiting Zentros Prime peacefully. No weapons were powered, no shields were raised. They were just there, showing the people of the capital world what galactic cooperation looked like. 3 years ago, your government told us that we were too primitive and violent to govern ourselves. They said we needed their guidance to become civilized. On Zentros Prime, billions of beings who had never questioned hegemony authority were listening to words they had never heard before. We rejected their offer. We chose freedom over security, chaos over control, independence over guidance. Your leaders called this choice primitive and violent. President Rodriguez paused, and in that pause, the people of Zentros Prime could see the ships around their world. Ships from species that had supposedly been too chaotic to govern themselves, working together in perfect harmony. Look around you. Look at the ships in your sky. These are the crews that your government said were too primitive for civilization. They come from hundreds of different worlds, speak thousands of different languages, and think in ways that would have been impossible under hegemony rule. The ships began to move not in military formation, but in a complex dance that showcased the diversity of galactic life. Crystalline ships that moved like living gems, bioships that flowed like water, mechanical ships that transformed their shapes as they flew. This is what freedom looks like. This is what happens when species are allowed to develop their own solutions, create their own technologies, and choose their own paths. Your government will tell you that this chaos will lead to war, suffering, and destruction. They will say that only their control can provide peace and order. President Rodriguez smiled, and somehow that smile was transmitted not just in her voice but in the movement of the ships around Zentros Prime. We're here to offer you a different choice. Join us, not as subjects, but as equals. Help us build a galaxy where every species can grow and develop according to their own nature. Help us create a civilization based on cooperation instead of control. The response from Zentros Prime was immediate and overwhelming. Riots began in the capital cities, but they weren't violent riots. They were celebration riots. People were dancing in the streets, singing songs they had never been allowed to sing, creating art they had never been allowed to create. The hegemony government tried to restore order, but their own security forces were joining the celebrations. Within days, Hegemony High Command issued a statement that would have been unthinkable just years before. They were requesting negotiations for their own surrender. The negotiations took place on Earth, in the same room where President Rodriguez had first declared war on the galaxy. High Counselor Zephys, the ancient leader of the hegemony, sat across from President Rodriguez. He looked exactly like what humans had always imagined an alien overlord would look like. Tall, ethereal, radiating an aura of ancient wisdom and power. But his first words were not what anyone expected. "We were wrong," he said simply. President Rodriguez leaned back in her chair. About what? About everything. About civilization, about order, about what it means to govern sentient beings. The ancient being who had ruled the galaxy for 10 millennia looked tired and somehow smaller. than he had appeared in his official broadcasts. We built our empire on the belief that chaos leads to suffering and that only strict order could provide peace. We thought that by controlling every aspect of galactic civilization, we were protecting it. And now? Now I have watched 400 species work together more effectively than our controlled empire ever did. I have seen civilizations flourish when allowed to develop freely. I have seen technologies emerge from cooperation that our directed research never achieved. High Counselor Zephys paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. But most importantly, I have seen something we forgot existed. Joy. The beings in our empire were peaceful and orderly, but they were not happy. Your alliance is chaotic and unpredictable, but your people sing while they work. The formal surrender of the galactic hegemony was signed 6 months later. But it wasn't really a surrender. It was a transformation. The hegemony's administrative systems were converted into the infrastructure for the Free Galactic Alliance. Instead of controlling member worlds, they facilitated communication and cooperation between them. Instead of enforcing uniformity, they celebrated diversity. Most of the former hegemony officials joined the new system, but in different roles. Admiral Vexhai became the Alliance's first Secretary of Defense, focused on protecting member worlds from external threats rather than internal rebellion. High Counselor Zephys stepped down from power but remained as an advisor, helping to transition thousands of worlds from authoritarian control to democratic self-governance. "What will you do now?" President Rodriguez asked him during one of their planning sessions. "Learn," he said simply. "For 10,000 years I thought I knew everything about governance and civilization. You have shown me that I knew nothing about the most important things: freedom, creativity, and the joy that comes from choosing your own path." The Free Galactic Alliance wasn't perfect. With hundreds of species making their own decisions, there were conflicts, disagreements, and mistakes. Some worlds struggled with their new freedom. Some species had to learn how to cooperate instead of being controlled. But it was alive in a way that the hegemony had never been. President Rodriguez, now serving as the first elected president of the Alliance, stood before the assembled representatives for her final address in the Orbital Assembly Hall. When the hegemony first came to Earth, they demanded our surrender. They told us we were too chaotic, too violent, too primitive for their civilized galaxy. She looked out at the incredible diversity of life forms that now work together as equals. They were right about one thing: we are chaotic. We are unpredictable. We don't follow the rules that say certain things are impossible. The assembly erupted in the multi-species sound that had become the Alliance's signature. Thousands of different forms of life expressing joy simultaneously. But they were wrong about what that means. Our chaos isn't a flaw to be corrected. It's the source of our strength. Our unpredictability isn't a problem to be solved. It's what allows us to find solutions that no one else can see. They demanded our surrender, and instead, we declared war on everything they represented. We declared war on the idea that freedom must be sacrificed for order. We declared war on the belief that diversity is dangerous. We declared war on the assumption that some beings have the right to control others. President Rodriguez smiled, the same smile that had been transmitted across the galaxy 3 years earlier. We won those wars not by conquering our enemies, but by showing them a better way to live. We won by proving that chaos and cooperation can coexist, that different species can work together without losing their uniqueness, and that freedom is not just the right of the strong, but the birthright of all sentient life. The applause continued for several minutes, a celebration not just of victory but of possibility. The hegemony demanded our surrender, President Rodriguez concluded. Instead, we surrendered our fear, our doubt, and our acceptance of the impossible. We surrendered the idea that we had to choose between freedom and safety. And in return, we gained something that the hegemony, in all their millennia of rule, never achieved. We gained a galaxy full of friends. As the assembly session ended, representatives from hundreds of worlds mingled freely, sharing ideas, technologies, and stories. The orbital station buzzed with dozens of languages, hundreds of different types of music, and the constant hum of beings who were free to be themselves. Looking out at the controlled chaos of galactic democracy in action, President Rodriguez reflected on how it all began, with humanity's refusal to accept that their situation was hopeless. That refusal had become the galaxy's new motto. Nothing is impossible if you're willing to try something that's never been done before. It was, everyone agreed, a very human way to run a galaxy, and it was working better than anyone had ever imagined possible.